He always got on my nerves. He was always talking trash. Anytime he'd hit a shot, he would immediately start getting in your face, saying all sorts of crazy stuff in your face, in your eye, all sorts of different things. And it's like, what's up with that? So I planned it out, and I waited till he was coming down, dribbling the ball down the court, and I knew I'd watched him enough. I knew what he was going to do, and he was going to come down, and he was going to go to the right side, and when he found an open spot, he was going to launch a three and try to knock down a three. So I waited, and at just the right moment, I raced over there, and he went up to take the shot, and I swatted that thing as hard as I could, and it didn't matter if it went out of bounds. It was just the joy of the moment of rejecting his shot, right? I didn't even trash talk after that. I just walked away, and I thought, man, that felt good, right? Feels good to reject someone who's rejecting you, who's trash talking you, who's causing you issues, right? But that's not really what we're called to do. That's not really how God has called us to respond in cases of rejection. What about the other side of it? What if it's you that's being rejected? What if it's you that got your shot rejected or didn't get the job or maybe you were picked last on the softball team or whatever it was, right? Asked someone to the banquet, built up the courage, and they said no, right? All these different ways, you get your test back and it's got a big red F with lots of marks on it. All these ways that we feel rejected in life. Rejection is something that goes beyond. It doesn't really matter what you look like. You can be extremely good looking. It doesn't matter what your position in life is. You can be extremely powerful and as has become clear in the United States, you can become powerful for 2 or 3 years and then your party throws you aside and you're done, right? Politics happens all the time. And we see this constant cycle of rejection in our world. Rejection based on color, rejection based on creed, rejection based on lines drawn in the sand. We see all this rejection going on in our world at varying levels, and we live in the midst of it all the time. How do we handle it? How do we deal with rejection? I think our story for today, the 10th leper, will give us some clues. Come with me to the book of Luke. The book of Luke, chapter 17. Beginning in verse 11. Luke chapter 17 and verse 11. On the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. I don't know how Jesus did it. Today, if we were to change the terminology, it'd be, Jesus was walking between the West Bank and Israel. Jesus was walking between the Gaza Strip and Israel, and somehow he found a way to minister to everyone. Somehow he found a way to relate to everyone in situations that seem impossible. In situations that seem like there is no resolution, there is a cycle of rejection that has been going on for hundreds of thousands and thousands of years, right? Jesus found a way to step into the middle of all of that and to minister to people in the midst of conflict, in the midst of everything going on. Jesus was walking between Samaria and Galilee on his way to Jerusalem. Stop and think for a moment about those 3 different locations. Samaria, the hated Samaritans, right? This group of people that had mingled pagan worship with religious worship, and they had been mingled from all over the place when the Syrians had brought them together and tried to mingle everybody together to bring about peace in the land. They were a hated people, and Jesus ministered there. And then Galilee, right? You got the blue-collar folks on one side of the Sea of Galilee, and you got the people on the other side who knows what they were all about, right? Raising pigs and all sorts of stuff. And Jesus is walking between Samaria and Galilee on his way to Jerusalem. Talk about a political nightmare, right? And yet Jesus found a way to make people feel accepted, when every single context around them was striving to make them reject each other. And as he's going, he meets someone along the way. Verse 12, and as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. In the middle of these three locations, all of which rejected each other and some form of conflict in the middle of each other, he comes and there's this group of people, and it says they were standing at what? At a distance. There's separation, there's distance, there's the idea that these people were somehow having to stay away. They weren't okay to be among us, right? They weren't okay to socialize with us, to eat with us. In fact, they couldn't even gather together to hear a sermon at church. They had to stay a great distance off. And they lifted up their voices. Had to be some distance if they're lifting up their voices and shouting to be heard across this distance. And they said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. If you rewind in time back to what it was like to be a leper in those societies, they were a step below everyone else, right? If you had an issue on your skin, if you had an issue on your skin, you went to see the priest. And the priest would take a look at it and he'd check if the hair had turned white, that was an issue, you were outcast. If it was too deep within the skin, that was an issue, you were outcast. You were cut off from your community. Now there are possibly varying levels of this in different communities related it to it different than others. So it's not just a standard uniform practice across the world, but in the majority of places, if you were diagnosed by the priest, if you were diagnosed by the priest with leprosy, it was a death sentence. It was only a matter of time, but it wasn't just a death sentence. You were not only given so long to live, you were cut off. You could no longer go and work among your colleagues anymore. You could no longer hang out with your friends anymore. You could no longer go and worship together with fellow believers. In fact, you couldn't even be in your own home with your own family. It was worse than COVID. It was a death sentence in every area of your life. Physically, spiritually, socially, you were isolated and cut off for the good of the community. And I stop for just a moment and wonder how must that have felt. In that moment when you're there and the priest tells you, you are now cut off from everyone. You are no longer allowed to be in the community. And this just wasn't a medical thing. It wasn't a medical precaution in their minds. It was not just to stop the spread of the disease. That was a part of it. But this went way beyond that. You were now a pariah. You were a leper because you had done something to offend God. You had done something to bring down God's wrath upon you. And so this was the just sentence for what you had done. And you were cut off, you were cast off, you were isolated, and everybody looked at you as if you deserved what you got. There was no isolation. There was no rejection greater than that of a leper. In fact, the Jewish scholars would often say that to heal a leper was as difficult as to raise the dead. To heal a leper was as difficult as to raise the dead. And these are the people that we find Jesus coming into contact. The outcasts that we can't even really understand how much they were outcast. We just don't experience that type of stuff in our society. Rejection. Have you ever faced rejection? If you haven't, you're lying, right? We've all faced rejection at some level or another. And it used to be we had this really cool saying, right? This really cool saying that went, sticks and stones, can you finish it? May break my bones, but Words can never hurt me, right? We had this thing. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words or names can never hurt me. Research has now proven that incorrect. University of Purdue actually did a study. They brought people in, they stuck them in an MRI machine, and while they're in the MRI machine, they had them play a game, an online game. So that they're in the MRI machine and they're playing Frisbee with two other people. So there's three of you. Picture this, you're in the MRI machine and you're online, you're playing Frisbee, right? And so you throw, and then the next guy throws, and he throws back to you. And after 5 or 10 minutes of playing catch with the Frisbee and things with those guys, all of a sudden, the guy that's supposed to throw you throws it to the other guy instead. And then the other guy throws it back to the first guy, and they cut you out of the loop. And as they did this, as you went through this rejection in the middle of this, child's game, right? They studied the brain to find out what would happen. And they noticed that in two different areas of the brain began to show activity. And as they compared these two areas, the brain started firing off. They realized that these are the exact same two areas that would begin firing if you had broken your arm or your leg. See, the response in your brain to rejection, firing off, is very similar, almost exactly the same, to the response if you broke an arm or a leg. So sticks and stones may break my bones, and words cause the exact same reaction in my brain. My brain tells me the same type of thing is happening. The same type of thing is happening to me, and I have to protect myself somehow in the midst of this moment. And so they began looking at this saying, okay, what do we do? And so they took another step and they said, oh, actually, this was in Michigan. They heard this study and they said, okay, we're going to do our own study. And so they brought a bunch of individuals in who had gone through recent breakups. And they brought them in, they stuck them in an MRI machine, and then they showed them pictures of their recent ex. And again, same thing started happening. Same areas of the brain started firing off as if you had just broken a bone. Now, I don't know what ethically that says about these studies. I mean, I don't think any of us would approve of you going and breaking people's bones to find out what area in your brain it reacted with. But anyway, long and short of it is, emotional rejection is processed in your brain in an extremely similar fashion to physical pain. So they took it one step further. They said, well, let's test this out. So they got a group, and they had a placebo group and another group, and the placebo group just got pills with nothing in them. The other group got Tylenol every day for 15 days. And then they brought them back in and showed them another trauma. They played this game again, the Frisbee game. And the amount of response was significantly decreased in those who had been taking Tylenol as if they were treating physical pain over those who were taking the placebo. They didn't have the same response to rejection as those who were on the placebo did. Now, I'm not recommending you go out and take Tylenol if you go through a breakup or if you fail a test, right? Or if you don't make the team. That's not the point. The point is our minds and our bodies are wired to respond to rejection. And it's no wonder that we as human beings then struggle so much with all these different areas of rejection, whether it's being picked last or not at all, or not getting a job or whatever it is. We all deal with and face these different areas of rejection. We were created to live in community. We were created to live in relationship. Being created in the image of God. God himself, his very nature is to live in community, right? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit together throughout eternity, living together in relationship. And we were designed and created in that image. We were designed and created with that need to live in community. Now, some of us, man, if we got one person, we're good, right? We don't need all y'all in a church setting. We're okay. If we just got one or two, we're fine. That's good with us. Others need constant crowds of people around, right? We have different levels of need for connection, but all of us have a need for connection. And rejection is a direct threat to that connection we were hardwired with the need for. So how do we respond? How do we respond? Well, when we get rejected, how do you respond? What are some of the different ways you respond when you get rejected, when you face rejection? Cry? Okay, tears. Tears, all right? Processing the pain, letting the tears flow. What's another way? What do some people do when they're rejected? Anybody? Any ideas? Shut down, right? We shut down, we isolate, we withdraw to ourselves. Other people, they've actually done studies back, I think it was in 2002, so this study was a little older. They studied 15 mass shooters, and they found that 13 out of the 15 had faced some level of social rejection that had twisted their minds and sent them down a path to where they ended up committing horrible crimes, right? We lash out in anger to protect ourselves from rejection because it's easier to push someone away than it is to feel the hurt and the pain. But the reason our minds tell us that rejection is painful is not because of the rejection itself. The reason our minds tell us that rejection is painful and to avoid rejection is because we are created for community. We are created to live in relationship. If we react with isolating ourselves, pulling back so that we avoid the pain, we have just withdrawn ourselves from that connection that we need, right? If we react in anger, lashing out and pushing people away so we don't experience the pain of rejection, we have isolated ourselves from that connection that we are hardwired to need. All of these responses, in one form or another, take us to the very point which our brains are trying to tell us you don't want to be there. Our brains are trying to signal us you need relationship, you need connection in your life. And Jesus knew this. Jesus designed us this way. And so when the lepers are standing at a great distance, I love how Jesus does this in all the different stories, and you see it in different ways manifesting itself in the different stories. Jesus comes up with a way not only to heal their physical pain, but to take care of that emotional rejection, that social rejection that they had faced. He tells them to do what? Go and present yourself to who? The priests. The ones that cut you off, the ones that isolated you, the ones that pronounced you unfit for social community. Go to them. Jesus, first of all, sends them to take care of their rejection issue. And along the way, their physical malady is taken care of. Notice which one he prioritizes. If you go back a few chapters in the book of Luke, there's another leper that comes to Jesus and asks for healing. And Jesus turns to him and he does what he's not supposed to do according to the law of Moses and according to the rules of the day. He reaches out and he does what before he heals the man? He touches him. He heals that isolation. He bridges the gap of that rejection. He places his hands on the leper first. And then he heals him second. It's amazing how in these different stories, Jesus addresses the deep inner need first before addressing the outside physical reality second. Right? He takes care of our emotional pain, our rejection first. He heals that and brings us back into connection with community. And then he heals the physical malady over and over and over again. It's amazing. Before the realm of psychology and research, Jesus knew that you and I were not created for rejection and isolation. He knew that we needed to live in community. He knew that we were designed to have feasts and parties and to live together and to laugh together and to love together, to live in community. And he seeks to restore that first and foremost. And one of the lepers gets it. They head off to the priest, and on the way, all of a sudden, they begin to see. Can you imagine that moment? They're probably all, I would guess, sanctified imagination here. Some would call it sanctified lying. One leper, he's missing some fingers and some toes and things. Another one, he's on death's doorstep, and they're all in various stage of disarray. Their body's falling apart, and maybe one just has, still just a few scabs and a few white hairs, and they're all headed towards the temple, all headed to meet with the priests. Thank God we have dermatologists to take care of us today, and you don't have to go to a priest or a pastor to deal with your physical maladies, to deal with this stuff. Right? So they're all headed there, and all of a sudden, my missing finger's back. My missing toe is back. The pain in my leg is gone. And I look over at the leper next to me, and his face, his skin has a healthy tone to it again. The sores and the stench is gone. And he's healed. With celebration, they're racing toward the temple to meet with the priests. But one of them realizes the deeper message that Jesus is trying to get across. You see, I'm guessing when they get there to the priest, they're not going to find the community they're looking for. When they show up there at the priest as ex-lepers, I'm guessing they're probably not extremely warmly welcomed back into the community, just based on the fact that it was believed that their sin was what caused this, and so what demon magic did you use to get rid of God's curse on you, right? It's highly likely they wouldn't be warmly embraced back into society. But there is one who turns and heads back to Jesus. There is one who in that moment realizes that what he needs above everything and anything else is connection, is relationship with Jesus. What he realizes in that moment is that while the rest of society rejected him, there is someone who never did. There is someone who looked at him in his worst moment and said, I love you anyway. Who looked at him in that trapped moment when all hope is lost, when it seems like there is no way forward, and he just hopes he could die and get it over with. That there is someone who wants to give him life. That there is someone who wants to enter into a relationship. That there is someone there who wants to sit down and eat with him, to celebrate with him, to live life together with him. And he turns and he runs back to Jesus. And he says in a loud voice, verse 15, then as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. And he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. It was a Samaritan in the middle between Jerusalem, Galilee, and Samaria. It was the triple outcast who came back and reconnected with Jesus. It was the Samaritan who received the complete healing. Not just the physical healing. Not just getting rid of pain and suffering, but who reconnected with his God in that moment. Then said Jesus, were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? And he said to him, rise, go your way, your faith has made you well. Your faith has made you well. There's several things we face when it comes to rejection. The first thing we usually do when we face rejection is we jump into a system of false beliefs. First reaction is a system of false beliefs. Story of the leper. What's the false belief there? It was what that caused his leprosy. It was his sin, right? His sin brought God's curse down upon him, and God cursed him, and now he is a leper. How often do you and I do that? Something goes bad in our life, and we turn to God and we say, what did I do wrong? Right? What did I do to cause you to hurt me? Any of you ever gone there? What did I do wrong that I'm now being punished in this moment? A system of false beliefs surrounds this. And it's the same thing in rejection, especially in relationship rejections. The first thing we want to do is blame, right? Most of us tend to blame ourselves. Some of us who head towards I won't say the narcissistic side, but the narcissistic side, we always blame it on someone else, right? Either way, we're a system of false belief of trying to place blame. Why? Why do we need to assign blame? Because it hurts, and by assigning blame, we shift the pain there or here. We either put it on God or someone else or ourselves. When the majority of the time, the vast majority of the time, it's not God doing it to you. Probably not even yourself that did something wrong to bring it upon yourself. It's just the sinful, broken world we live in. It's just the nature of living in a fallen world. Now, there are times where we did something wrong, right? If I kicked your dog and ran over your cat, there's probably a reason you don't invite me over for lunch. It just the way it works. So it's okay to look, did I do something that I need to change my behavior? But assigning blame as I am unworthy or I am broken, there's something wrong with me that people reject me, that is a false system of belief that we need to avoid when we experience rejection. Jesus didn't go there. Jesus did not go there with the leper, and he doesn't ask you to go there when you face rejection as well. False beliefs. Avoid false systems of belief. The second thing that we often do is we skip the first step of acknowledging and grieving the pain. We tend to try to bury it, right? We tend to try to bury the pain deep down and just skip over it. Right? Now, next time it'll go better, right? The reality is we experience pain for a reason, and if we don't take time to grieve and process the pain, it's going to pop up some other way in our lives. Pain unresolved does not just dissipate and go away. It will find its way to pop out, right? You have a bad day at work, you don't deal with it. Someone at home is probably going to get the brunt of it when your patience is shorter, right? If you have a bad day at home and you don't deal with it there, someone at work's likely going to get the bad end of the deal, right? If we don't deal with our pain, if we don't process our pain, it's going to come out in some other way. It's the same way internally. If we don't allow ourselves to grieve and experience the pain, we're going to find a physical symptom coming up. We're going to have a nervous breakdown or a panic attack or something's going to go on in our lives. Our bodies will let us know, hey, you've got this unresolved pain that you haven't dealt with. You haven't processed. So let yourself feel the pain. Let yourself experience it, but don't get stuck there. That's the second trap. Allowing that pain to engulf you, allowing yourself to be trapped as a victim of the moment is not healthy either. Acknowledge and grieve. Don't look to place blame. Go ahead and assess briefly, right? Did I do something at work that I didn't get the promotion? No, the boss hired his cousin, right? It's okay to analyze and take a look at it, see if there's something clear, or maybe, I showed up to the interview totally unprepared and said a bunch of stupid stuff, and there's a reason I need to be more prepared next time, right? So it's okay to analyze those things, but don't play the blame game. The next item is probably the most important. Next item is probably the most important. The lepers were cast off by society. They were declared hopeless, without hope. No way out, no doctor, no medicine, no experimental medical practice that you could try. There was no way out. It was a death sentence. And Jesus comes along and he gives hope. He gives hope. He says, there is a way out. He gives the opportunity for resilience, for getting back up and moving forward, right? What would have happened if Michael Jordan, when he didn't make the basketball team, said, I'm done? A lot of us wouldn't have got to enjoy the greatest basketball player ever to play the game. Unapologetically, categorically, a statement of fact. If he hadn't shown resilience in your life, it's okay to experience the pain, but don't stay there. Get up, go forward, find relationships and connections. Do what the 10th leper did. He came back and he found a connection with the God of the universe. He came back and he found a connection with the one who could restore him and heal him. He came back to the one who embraced him, who never, ever, ever let him go. And that's what God says to you and me this morning, is I will never reject you. I will never cast you off. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. It doesn't matter how bad you've blown it. I simply won't forsake you. I will not reject you. In fact, the book of Isaiah gives us these amazing words describing what's going on in this moment. Isaiah 53, verse 3 says, he was despised and rejected by men. He was despised and rejected by men. If you go back to the story in Luke, just a few verses after this story of the healing of the leper ends, Jesus is talking about the second coming. They're trying to figure out what's going to happen. And Jesus says, none of that's going to happen because I must be despised and rejected by this generation. This whole generation will reject me. And I want you to see in this story of the leper that I will never reject you, even though you all will reject me. It's an amazing truth at the end of this story. And Isaiah is prophesying this, what's going to happen. He says, he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised and we esteemed him not. Now catch these next words, because this is critical to the healing process in all of this. Surely he has borne our griefs. Surely he has carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that made us whole. That brokenness, that pain, that suffering you feel inside is healed when you come to the one that takes it all away from you. He takes it all away and he embraces you and he says, there is one more that came back. We're not 10 healed, but here is one more who realizes that this is all about a relationship with your God. This is all about reconnecting with the God who will never leave you, who will never forsake you. Jesus came so you might have life, but not just life, so that you might have connection. Eternal connection with him. And I think back to the words of the song. What the Lord has done in me. Let the weak say I am strong. Let the poor say I am rich. Let the sinner say I am righteous. I am saved. I am forgiven because of what the Lord has done